Greetings, community. It's Chris. It's the Mad Respect. Coming back to you again. This is part 2 of my library graphic novel reviews for stuff I read in April, well, in March and all of April. So it's a pretty big pile here. This is all my independent books, so let's get right into it. First, we have Beastars, volumes 10 and 11. This is a manga that I found out about through my daughter. Last summer she showed us the anime of season 1, and while I've been waiting for season 2 to come on, I believe it's going to be on in June on Netflix. I went back and started reading the manga. So volume 10 and 11 finally finishes up the overarching story of the whole series. In volume 1, Tem, the alpaca, an herbivore, was eaten, devoured, and murdered by one of the carnivores at this high school of anthropomorphic teenage animals, which is split equally between carnivores and herbivores. And we finally find out who the murderer is in the second half here. And he is taken down by Legoshi the Grey Wolf, who's our main character. So that kind of closes out the opening story arc. Okay, next we have Firepower by Robert Kirkman and Chris Samney from Image Skybound. This is volume 2, Home Fires, which is actually the first 6 issues of the ongoing series, because volume 1 was the Prelude trade, which was a standalone graphic novel that was put out before issue 1, which is weird because issue 1 was also a free comic book day issue, which I have, but then they also put it out so you could buy it later on. So this is issue 1 through 6 of the series. It takes place about 15-20 years after the Prelude trade. He's our main character is married now with 2 children, and the ghosts of his past at the Firepower dojo are coming back to haunt him. They want him to rejoin the dojo because I guess a corrupt force has taken over the dojo in his absence, and the corrupt force comes to try and kill him and his family, and the remaining people who are kind of on his side are just trying to recruit him back to try and fix things. So kind of ends on a cliffhanger where they're all staying in a motel, hiding out to see what happens next. So looking forward to seeing how that series continues on. And next we have Star Wars Rebel Heist from Dark Horse and Matt Kint. This is either a 4 or 5-ish, I think it was a 4-issue miniseries collected in here. It has a story of Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, and at the end Luke Skywalker trying to get a Imperial code and also recruit new rebels to the cause. And it is an interesting story that begins with Han Solo and ends up with him in prison, and then kind of wraps around back to Luke Skywalker in an interesting way that definitely brings the story full circle. And at the end you see the new rebel recruits beginning their own rebel sabotage missions. So it was interesting in that sense that this takes place before Empire Strikes Back. But this is my first step into the Star Wars comics. I have checked out quite a few more, and you'll be seeing those in a future reviews video. But pretty good way to start. If I'm going to start reading Star Wars, it was an interesting story. And next we have this big boy here, Adventure Man, Volume 1, The End and Everything After. This is by Matt Fraction and the Dodsons, Terry and Rachel Dodson. This is interesting. It's about a mother and her son who are reading comic books and pulps about this old superhero team led by Adventure Man. And the story begins with the end of the final pulp where they're all defeated by their enemies, and that's kind of how it ends. And then it seems that the pulps are based on reality that has been suppressed by the evil forces, and the good side of the heroes have been trying to contact this woman and show her that the pulps are not all just fiction, and they start to give her some of Adventure Man's powers, and her son joins her as kind of a sidekick, but art was good, the story was good, but it kind of ends, I guess this is just volume 1, I don't know if there's going to be a volume 2, but it just kind of ends on, not really a cliffhanger, but just in the middle of what is going on, so, but pretty good. I would recommend checking it out and reading it, especially on this nice oversized format. You get a nice look at all the art, looks really cool. And then we got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Ultimate Collection Volume 1. This collects the original Mirage series 1 through 7 and the not Michelangelo. Is it Michelangelo? Oh, Raphael Special Number 1 with the introduction of Casey Jones. I just decided I'd try to get into Turtles a bit. I read the John Lee's single issue in a trade recently, so I decided I'll go back to the start and read these. I will say that I did not finish it. I did finish the first 3 issues and the Raphael special, and there's a lot of dated 80s references, etc. But it is very well drawn. You can tell it was a labor of love for them, that they really put their all into this as independent creators who were just doing this in their living rooms. Overall, I'd say I'm not really a big Turtles fan, and this didn't really change that, or it didn't really spin the pendulum one way or the other towards me being a bigger Turtles fan, but it was enjoyable what I did read. And then we have Bowie, Stardust, Ray Guns, and Moonish Daydreams. This is a biopic graphic novel by Steve Horton, and art and plot or whatever by Michael Allred. This story basically is the formation of David Bowie as a musician up through probably the very early 80s, and then at the end it has a quick overview of the rest of his career. But I started getting into David Bowie just after he died, unfortunately. My wife was listening to his music, and I got through it through osmosis, so it was interesting to see all these pictures of songs that I've been listening to for the last 5 years come to life in this format, and it's a really cool oversized format. And then we have The Invention of Hugo Cabre by Brian Selznick, which is a combination of these woodcut type illustrations with a short novel interspersed. This was on the top 25 literary graphic novels of all time list that I read online. And this one, the basic premise is it's about a boy whose father dies in a museum fire, and he finds this magician's marionette sort of robot thing that would, when it is working, will draw a picture. And while he's stealing parts to try and fix this, the grumpy old man at the toy, that would be like a toy booth at Grand Central Station, catches him stealing parts, so he takes his notebook on all the ways to repair this thing and forces him to work. And then instead of waiting to get his notebook back, he just continues to take extra parts and fixes it on his own. And when it draws a picture of a scene from A Trip to the Moon, the first moving picture by George Méliès. And you find out that the grumpy toy man is George Méliès, and he's because of his bad shake in the movie industry, he's kind of put that part of his life behind him and hid away all his drawings and all that. And at the end, he gets the inspiration to come back and talk about his films again, and adopts Hugo at the end. So it has a really good, lighthearted ending. If you have any interest in George Méliès, or A Trip to the Moon, or The Train Coming to the Station, that sort of thing, you should definitely check this out. And then we have Nanita Okafor's After the Rain. This is based on one of her short stories, which I guess is a collection of short stories about African legends and horror. But this one was interesting. It's about, at the start, a zombie boy comes to her door during a rainstorm and kind of like touches her cheek, and then her aunt and her two aunts are witches, and they want her to take part in this ceremony where she has to kind of like push back the evil that's going on in this small town. And at the end, she receives kind of superpowers, but not in like a superhero way. But she obtains special powers that she wants to use to help people, and that's kind of how it ends. But it was interesting. I didn't expect this to be horror, and I was happy it was. And then we have Breakwater by Catriona Chapman. This is brand new. Came out either late last year or early this year. This is about a woman in her 40s who's been working at a rundown movie theater in England for far too long. She doesn't want to really finish her college degree or anything like that. She's just gotten used to just doing this kind of crap job now for years, and I guess it pays enough for her to make a living, but they hire a new employee who she gets to know, and she decides to open her life to him a little bit, and it finds out he's off his meds and his family's looking for him, so she has to decide whether she should help his family or help him because he just wants to live his life too. We got Moonshine Volume 4 by Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo. This is the werewolf story set in Prohibition. In this volume, he's in Cleveland at the time that Elliot Ness was the top cop there after he'd taken down Capone supposedly, and this is when there was the torso killer in Cleveland. And this one, you basically find out that everything is being run through his old boss in the New York Mafia. So it's basically werewolf versus torso killer in this volume. And then we have Gideon Falls, Volume 5, Wicked Worlds. This is the second to last volume, and I will say that as soon as I had this checked out, I went to the LCS and bought issue 27, so I did read all the way through to the end of the story, and it does end pretty well. It kind of gives you the swerve at the end where it looks like it's a happy ending, but then probably not. But overall, this was a crazy horror, sci-fi. It has everything in there, and it's another reason why Jeff Lemire is one of the best people writing comics today. Next is Transformers versus the Terminator. It is versus. It doesn't say versus on the title. But Transformers versus the Terminator, Enemy of My Enemy. This comes from IDW and Dark Horse. It's basically what if Skynet teamed up with the Decepticons to enslave the planet? Would their conquest be any more horrifying? But in this one, they send Arnold. I guess it's supposed to be Arnold. They mentioned that he sounds Austrian, but they send the Arnold T-800 back in time to kill all of the Transformers before they can team up with Skynet. And Arnold doesn't discriminate between the Autobot and Decepticons. He just wants to kill them all, but then he finds out the Decepticons are the evil half of the Transformers, and the Autobots team up with him and Sarah Connor, and it was fun. That's all I can say. It was fun. And then we have The Crow Special Edition by James O'Barr. This contains everything James O'Barr wrote and drew for The Crow back in the 80s, and some new material that says at the start he's done everything with a pencil and ink bottles. He's never used computers or anything to touch up his art. So even the new stuff in here, he put paper and pen to paper to complete it. But this was really good. It's a really sad revenge story about his girlfriend has been murdered by the seedier elements of New York City. This is New York City. And he just basically goes on revenge, and this is definitely a lot more violent than any of the movies had been. He definitely relishes in the killing, but then he does have a heart because he meets a young girl who is in a bad situation with her mom and dad being drug heads, and even though he's going to make the ultimate sacrifice at the end, more or less, he takes the time to stop and tell her, "Don't give up. I want you to be something to this little girl." So, The Crow, very good. I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. BPRD, Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. This is Volume 4 of The Plague of Frogs. This is the conclusion. Half and half on this one. The first half is just a big long story about finding out why Liz is possessed by this evil sorcerer guy, and whether his vision of the future coming to an end because of these frogs is true or not. And then the second half is really good with the final battle. Basically, all they really need to do is let Liz off the chain with her firepower, and she burns everything up. And the team kind of splits after a big congressional hearing at the end. And I know there's more volumes of BPRD after this, so I'll probably check those out in the future. But I'm glad I read that whole series. It was fun. Abbott. This is the original Abbott series from Boom Studios and Saladin Ahmed. It took me a while to kind of get into the groove of it. It was kind of dull at the start, but it does end up being very good by the end. It's a good horror journalist story. It's about a journalist who, especially like an African American female Kolchak from the Night Stalker movies and the show. She basically knows about all the supernatural stuff going on in the undercurrents of the town, and since it's happening to African American and black people, the white cops don't give a shit, and she kind of has to push to get any of her stories written. And she does actually get fired by the end of this, but then she gets hired by an African American newspaper at the end. So I guess that's what's going to happen in Abbott 73, which is now going on from Boom. But I enjoyed this quite a bit. Jupiter's Legacy. This is by Mark Miller and Frank Whiteley. I checked this out because I figure next month when it hits Netflix, there's going to be like 25 people waiting for the one copy they have in the system. So I also have Volume 2 waiting for me at the library right now. But this one is extremely, extremely wordy, and as pretty as the art is, it's tough to get through a couple of pages like this, or it takes like 5 minutes to read a page. But it's basically, what if Superman and Wonder Woman settled down and had 2 kids, but they didn't want to carry on the tradition of being superheroes. They just want to, one's a drug addict and the other one's just kind of a total fuck up. And the daughter of Superman is dating his arch-villain's son, and she gets pregnant with that baby, and then the uncle of the Superman character's son says, "Hey, we should be running the planet, not just having secret identities and taking care of everyone all the time. So let's murder your dad, and then we can control the Earth." So that happens about midway through the book, and then the last chapters are his daughter and her boyfriend and their young son hiding out from the regime of superheroes who have taken over the world, and kind of ends halfway through the story. So I'm looking forward to reading part 2. And next we have Billionaire Island from Mark Russell and Steve Pugh. This is basically summed up by the introduction by Brian Michael Bendis at the start. It's like, for all of the billionaires there are in the world, everyone's big complaint about a billionaire is, why don't they just put the money back into us and make the world a better place? But the bottom line is, every billionaire in the world, all the money they have spent all of that money trying to prevent anyone else from ever becoming a billionaire because it's their little club. So this is basically they build an island that is like a giant ship that can circumnavigate the globe so that when you're on this island you can't be found on satellite, etc. And you have to have $1 billion in your bank account and a certain chip in your body to even to set foot on the island. And then this is about a guy who they hired, a mercenary who they hired to dose a town with a sterilization drug so that they can keep the population down. And he's going to find out that his family is also eating the food that the stuff is laced with. So his family dies horribly, and his job now is to exterminate as many billionaires as he can. So he finds his way onto the island, and I really liked it. And here's my biggest letdown of the month is Reckless by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. I love Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Their hit rate is like 99.9%. And this one is actually pretty good too, except in the introduction they say that this is based on their love of 70s pulp novels by like John D. MacDonald and the Parker novels and stuff like that. So he wanted to create his own Parker type character. And it's a pretty good story, but it's a little overly wordy. And the new character, Ethan Reckless, he doesn't hold a candle to some of the characters from Criminal, or especially the character from Pulp last year, or I guess it was earlier this year for me, but the last one I read was Pulp. Pulp, I think, reigns over this by quite a big height. And then the overall story is a little bit unbelievable, and since they're making this a series of novels, there's no real, no real suspense on whether who's going to make it through and who's not. But I'll still keep reading the Reckless series if they continue to put out new ones. The new one is supposed to come out this month. I haven't seen anything about it. Maybe it got pushed back a little bit. But Reckless, I liked it, but it was kind of disappointing. And now my co-picks of April and March. King of Nowhere by W. Maxwell Prince, Tyler and Hillary Jenkins. This is basically about a town that's been dosed with radiation by the government just to see what the hell would happen. And 2/3 of the town start becoming anthropomorphic animals, and the rest of them just get various deformities, etc. And this scientist who is part of dosing the town feels bad about it, so he brings a stranger and unloads his story to this stranger while he's all drunk. And he's like, do you want to see the town closer up? And he brings him close and drops him off. And they get into a car accident while he's planning to drop him off. And since they're in a car accident, he doesn't want to get caught by the government, so he just leaves the guy there and heads back to work, hoping everything will be fine. And then the government does find out that this guy has wandered into town, and the town is quarantined, and no one's ever supposed to find out about it, so they send in a kill crew to take out our main character here. And anyone else who might have tried to leave town because he showed up. And then the scientist comes back and tells everybody, hey, you're quarantined, you're basically animals in a cage and the government hates you. So they end up defeating the government kill crew, which is one man who's basically a super badass who can kill anybody he wants. But they end up taking him out and shutting off the cameras to the city from the government, and they have the choice of leaving the town or staying. So they all decide to stay because this is the life they know, and he leaves because our main character, has walked out on his wife and infant child at the beginning, and so on his way back to them, he calls her on the phone, and you just kind of hear the phone say hello, hello, and he's already back into some sort of stupor in his mind where he doesn't really want to be back with her, I don't think. So it was odd, it was dreamy, it was interesting, the art was great, and W. Maxwell Prince, what can you say? I guess this is what Ice Cream Man would be if they did a 5-issue arc. And my other pick is The Sixth Gun by Cullen Bunn and Brian Hurt. This is Volume 1, Cold Dead Fingers. This is a Western horror about supernatural guns. There's a series of 6 of them, and if you have all 6 of them, you can open a chasm in the ground that has something even worse inside. And it's about the undead owner of one of the guns. He has been kept on holy ground forever and ever, and finally his minions find a way to kill the man who stole his gun and kept him on holy ground and free him. And the holy man's daughter ends up touching this evil gun first, so it bonds to the person who first touches the gun at any certain time. So her and this other vigilante who used to be working with the undead general are basically on a race against time to try and see if they can uncover that treasure, but they find out that it is really an unholy weapon of some sort that you have to have all 6 guns to open. And I see that this one has about 8 to 10 volumes, so I'm looking forward to taking a deeper dive into this. But I really enjoyed Volume 1, and that would be my pick of March and April, along with King of Nowhere by W. Maxwell Prince and the Jenkins. These have my highest recommendation. So that is what I read. Sorry that was so lengthy. I had quite a lot of independence that I got through. Next up on the channel, my pre-order from Discount Comic Book Service is here, and that video will be coming up very shortly today. So look forward to that. If you read any of this, let me know what you thought. Leave a comment down below. Thumbs up if you liked the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.